the next step comes to lighting, because right now that hair looks relatively flat. There's multiple options that we can use. We can use the scanline renderer to get results, or we can try to use Mental Ray. I'm going to use Mental Ray here to render this off. So I'm going to jump back to my side view, go to my Create tab, go to my Lights tab, and I'm just going to use a target light. Alright, so from the photometric lights, I'll use a target light, and then just click and drag to my target. I'm going to go to my Modify tab here, and I'm going to make some adjustments to my settings. The first one is I'm going to change to Mental Ray Shadow Maps and turn on Shadow Casting. Then under the light distribution type, I'm going to change this from Uniform Spherical to Spotlight. I'll be able to see the cone of my spotlight. This is where I may want to jump to perspective mode just to make sure that I actually have my light in the right location, as well as my hotspot in the right location, so that it's not either too hot or there's not a major cutoff. So that looks pretty good right now. And I'm going to continue scrolling down and make some adjustments here to where it says Shape Area Shadow. I'm going to just change this from point to rectangle. My rectangle is quite large right now, and that's going to be something that I will change the dimensions on right here. And I'll just set this to 4 and 8. So now I have this plane that's going to be projecting our light source from. If I want to try to have this show up in the reflection, is I can easily check this and get that result. I'll just increase my resolution of my map size, as well as turn on transparent shadows. We want to be very careful with this because this is going to increase our render time substantially, especially when we have transparent shadows. But it should give us the best result. So now that our light is starting to go, I could try to take a render of this, but we're not going to get an accurate result yet because we haven't turned on Mental Ray. But before we get into Mental Ray, I'm going to jump into my material editor so that I can apply a shader to this plane so that it doesn't show up in my render. So in my material editor, I'm going to click right here where it says Standard, open up my material map browser. I have a list of shader types that we can add, and I'm going to choose the map or matte shadow type. Hit OK, and we have a series of options. Alright, and it says receive shadows, affect alpha. I'll have it receive shadows and affect the alpha so that it turns invisible, basically. So with this plane selected, I'm just going to assign material to selection. And if we want, we can try to show map in viewport, but we're not going to see anything. However, when we render this, I didn't apply it. There we go. So when I render this, what's going to happen is that the plane will become invisible. And like I said, I can try to take a test render and see what happens. And we get to see nothing. Even though we see nothing, we actually do have an alpha channel. Alright, but we can also see that the roots are being varied. Alright, and this is because of the plane visibility. So I'm going to open up my render settings here. And to turn on Mental Ray, we have a couple options. The easiest one is just go to Assign Render, and under Production, I'm going to click on the ... here to go to Mental Ray Renderer. Once in Mental Ray Renderer, I'm going to go to the Indirect Illumination here, and I'll just change this quality setting to low. Alright, this will just give us a good start. There'll be some other settings that I want to adjust, which is under the trace depth. I'm just going to start all of these values at 5. For a more refined setup, we can definitely turn on our final gather point interpolation. I'm just going to keep this off for right now because the interpolate over number of final gather points is set to 30, and this basically is a draft setting, right, or a low quality setting, so that we get an idea of what is going to happen in our scene. I can close this, but we won't be able to render our hair right now. And the reason is that Mental Ray doesn't like the hair system itself, so we have to go into some settings to make some adjustments so that the hair will actually show up. This is found under Rendering, Effects. When I have my object selected, we'll see that the hair fur effect shows up. I can click on this, show that it's active, and then scroll down here to hair and fur. I want to change my hair and fur type from buffer to MR_prim, which means mental ray primitives. I can change my voxel resolution, which is a quality setting. I'll just keep it at the default setting right now, and you'll notice that there really are not many other options. So now that we have the environment and effects set up so that the hair itself will be a primitive, is I want to set up a camera so that I can render this off. I'm going to go to my side view and then zoom in like so. I'm going to press Control-C on my keyboard to try to create a camera. If that doesn't work, what we need to make sure we do is press P first to go into our perspective view. Is that fur or hair does not render correctly in one of our orthographics, so we do need to make sure that we are in a perspective view. Once in this perspective view here, I'm going to press Control-C once again, and this should give me my target camera. I'm going to lower my field of view value right here to 28 degrees. When I zoom in on the fur, or when I change my field of view value, I do zoom in on the fur a little bit, but what I want to do is make sure that I have a safe frame. So I'm going to click on where it says camera 1 here, and I can get the option of show safe frame. Alright, this is going to show me my resolution gate for my render. Where this is defined is back under the render settings. So if I go to common, is that right here where the width and height are set, is that this is my resolution gate. Since this is probably going to be a texture, what we want to do is figure out what our defined resolution is. Do we want it as a 512 by 512 map, or do we want it something smaller? I like to work big, so I'm going to just set this to 512 by 512 right now, for the sake of that it will give us a sufficient render, and I mean this is only one part of the hair. I can set up more pieces of hair and render this a lot larger, like a 2048 map. But again, we have to remember that this is going to take time. So now that I have my resolution gate set, I can take a look to make sure that all my hair is on the screen. If it's not, I can cheat a little bit by just using my scale tool and trying to scale the fur in so that it's all tight and not being cut off. And I'm just adjusting the camera a little bit to make this a little tighter. And everything looks like it's ready to start render. So I'm just going to hit the render production. Before I finish rendering this, I'm just going to take a look and see that at this point it's really white. So this means that the light source itself is too close to the camera. So I'm just going to stop this render and pull the camera back. I've pulled the light source a lot further back so that we can take a render, and now this base color right here is starting to look a little better. It's still a little bright, but that might be something that I can fix easily in Photoshop. So I'm just going to wait for this to render, and we'll be able to see the end result. So this is the result. After 9 minutes, or 8 minutes and 41 seconds, here's the result that we got. I can now just save this, and I want to make sure that I save this as a format that has an alpha channel. So I'll save this off as a target, and just call this Ray Hair Test 2. And make sure that I do save it as 32 bits per pixel, and pre-multiplied alpha is checked. So we have basically what's using some of our default or standard settings as far as the hair fur modifier go, by just adjusting the material parameters in that manner. If I want to create or use one of the prefabs, all I need to do is make sure the plane is selected, and right here where it says presets, I'm going to click on load, and it will open up our presets where we can choose a series of different options. So I can fuzzy brown, red scraggle, fro, dumpy wet brown. Alright, and I'll just double click on that, and now these are my fur lines. And just to make sure that they are being applied to my splines. So I'm going to click on Recomb from Spline and select my spline. And then just like we had done previously, is I can scale this down to try to make it a little tighter. My settings should be, for the most part, already set, and it looks like I might want to comb a little bit because of this area. So I'll just click on Style Hair. I got my brush. I'm going to see if I can comb this up. Alright, so I have this in a little more, so that should work. I'll finish styling, and I'll just keep my settings the way they are and hit render.
So this render took about 48 minutes to do.
We can see that we have some nice variations and fullness at the roots, and we have some self-shadowing. There's a limitation to the self-shadowing because if we actually look down at the general parameters for the hair, we'll probably notice that there are some differences compared to what we previously had. We have the hue variation. That's one of the differences. The root thickness is a lot thicker, and it looks like everything else is basically the same settings that we had previously. So this actually isn't too bad. But when you adjust some of the other presets, is that you'll notice that there's a substantial difference, especially with the hair passes, where they crank it up sometimes to 8, and that's going to give you the most realistic effect. It just takes a long time to render. Occluded ambient, you want to typically keep this down low, so that you don't have too much of an issue of the hair sort of glowing. So this is basically it for creating the hair texture itself using 3ds Max.